quickly introduce myself. I'm Haberdashery, and this is my panel on all about haberdashery. So it's basically like those wonderful tools that you use to craft anything with. There's hundreds and hundreds in fact of haberdashery items out there. So what I've done in this panel is I've selected a few which I feel that you're more likely to use it across several projects rather than a specific one. So just to give you an idea of all the topics, so the first one is basic essentials. This should be everything which I feel that you should actually at least own, and there's I guess the expansion pack version of each of those versions which I will show you. Second one is fabric preparation. So this is when before you basically pin it up and sew in a sewing machine, this is what you might need to do to prep the fabric before you get to the stage. Section 3 is all about what you might need to do to set up the machine, and then anything you might need to use between that kind of time. Section 4 is hemming, so basically finishing off all those edges, something that you might need for it. And the last one, which I'm not sure how time for, would be to show fastenings that I tend to use, and just to give you ideas of those. So without further ado, so the first thing I think of is I need my scissors, and these are all different kinds of scissors which might come useful to you at some stage. The first one is general craft scissors. So obviously it's bog standard, use it for foam, use it for your paper patterning. Everyone should own at least that to begin with. The second one is your dressmaking pair of scissors, which specifically have to use it for fabrics because we all, most of us I imagine will know the rule, do not use it on paper, otherwise I will kill you. So it's always really handy to have a really good sharp pair of scissors because you'll know when the fabric just isn't cutting. Seam ripper, not quite a pair of scissors, but it is a type of blade. I'm sure some of us have used this a lot. I definitely have, a lot of the times. So that's another useful tool that I tend to favour. Scissors. So these are basically slightly different from dressmaking scissors. Pretty much can cut fabric all the same, but the difference is that you notice there's a slight little angle with the handle. So because the idea is so that it doesn't glide along the fabric when you cut it. And these there's nothing wrong with just having dressmaking pair of scissors, but these are an option if say you use a lot of very thick fabrics and you use a lot of layers or something. It's and because these are the kind of type that they would use in sewing shops. But otherwise, this is perfectly fine. Pinky shears, rare exception, but I tend to use pinky shears because they've got a slight little triangle kind of tooth on the blade, so they're slightly bit more different than the others. These are really good for if you ever sew something which has a circular edge and you wanted to reduce bulk around it, you then cut around it. That would end up helping you with that. Embroidery scissors. So these I often use for for pretty much clipping curves because I've done it in the past where I've got really impatient, couldn't find these scissors, use the long pair of scissors, cut through my thread fabric, I'm I regret not finding those scissors now. So very, very handy for there's a tiny pair of scissors. And the other thing I would recommend would be rotary blade. Rotary blade specifically, I imagine you would use it for much more trickier fabrics because unlike scissors, they don't at least attach along the blade, and they use it over the top. The only thing I would say about rotary blades is that they apply quite easily, so you have to keep changing the blade quite a lot. Next one is dressmaker's tape. So self-explanatory. Measuring tape, another very, very important thing that you have, taking measurements. Another ruler that would be quite handy is a quilter's ruler, and you can see that they have straight angle edges, they also have a 45-degree angle. It's great if you need to cut anything on the bias and just to check to make sure that your angles are pretty much straight. Use it, very useful. Cutting that, because I don't actually have a table to cut with, I use the floor, but sometimes I need to get one of those cutting mats to use it so that I don't actually cut the carpets. And generally I always use it for that reason and for cutting EVA foam as well, and obviously it does lead to at least wipe off the mess afterwards as well. And if you are working with very, very long pieces, I recommend a 1 metre ruler as well. Because there's times in which I've had say a piece that's 70 centimetres or something. I'm literally sitting there with my 30 centimetre ruler just going like that, marking it. So it got a lot easier when I have.
Did you think about maybe weighing down your measuring tape?
I did do it, but then I kind of find that it doesn't fit as not as accurate. I get a little bit worried because obviously it's so like fiddly, but it's not like straight.
Weigh it down.
Oh yeah. That isn't good actually. No, it's not mine, but
Just a little.
But no, it's okay. Okay, and these are all fabric markers, which like there's like everyone basically has a preference to these, and it's like there's not one better than the other, unfortunately. So pencil markers is the one that I generally always use because like this one I tend to find that it basically leaves marks on it so that after when I've sewn it, at least I can see from the line of fabrics and pieces together. And you have it in different colours because obviously you're working with so many different types of colours of fabric. It's always useful to have like a different variety. Tailor's chalk is something else that very very useful as well. That also, and the beauty of this is that it does come off if it was like something, say, I don't know, if you were embroidering something and you need to mark something. It's quite handy to have that. This is basically the chalk pen marker is the pen version of a tailor's chalk, where at least I find that you have a lot more better control of it, which is why I certainly love using that one. Quite a lot, I find that I need to kind of remove marks over anything. This one, these two, there's basically a pen version of a water erasable marker and a heat erasable marker. I would say if you were to use these ones, use it with caution, test the scrap piece of fabric as well, because the idea is water erasable markers, imagine, after you get the fabric wet, the marks will disappear. Heat erasable marker is when you set heat to it, so after you mark it, put an iron over it, it should disappear. But it will vary the results on different kinds of fabrics.
I have a question about the tailor's chalk. Every time I bought tailor's chalk, it's done nothing. I've either had to properly put a lot of force into using it, which has ruined the fabric. But even when I've sharpened it against the sharp edge, I've heard many people say, it's done fuck all.
What kind of fabric? It depends on what kind of fabric you are using as well. So because I might find
I've used it on multiple different types.
I find that you break it in half and it works.
Yeah.
Get the powdery bit going.
Or I tend to find that the pencil, is a lot more kind of effective. Yeah, the chalk ones, because I find that I don't really like to use the chalk ones all that much, just because it just disappears. And I find that it depends on what the fabric it is as well. It varies the results. Next one is the thread. So first of all, one I imagine a lot of you work with is polyester thread. Polyester thread is for kind of more cheaper variants. You can use it for say cottons or linens, basically not pain in the ass is kind of to sew with. But I find that polyester works really well if you're sewing say stretch fabrics or something a bit more trickier. I find that you need a much more better quality kind of thread for that, because I've used cheap thread to do zigzag stitches on it, and it just doesn't work. So when I switched it to a much more higher brand, it was a lot more effective. The second one, if you say there's no narrow elastic thread, this is really good for if you're making a garment, say a full bodysuit where you need a lot of stretch into it. This is absolutely fantastic because, as the name suggests, the thread has a slight bit of elasticity, so it will stretch with the fabric as you wear it. So that's a good recommendation for that. And the last one is netless Cerathox thread, which this also works for stretch type fabrics, basically quite slippery kind of fabrics, because it's so fine thread. That's why it tends to work. Do you actually have some samples that can actually pass around if you want to get a feel of what the different types of threads feel like? So send it to you guys. Next one, of course, is the pins. So, first general one, that most of us imagine might start with is with dressmaking pins. That's for generally most of fabrics. If you're working with more delicate fabric, I would recommend fine head pins, because these ones, the difference is, it's a bit hard to tell, they are a lot more skinnier than your bog standard dressmaking ones. Because the idea is it's for very thin fabrics. I've had it before where I've used thicker pins, and it's basically snagged to say chiffon or something. So this one is very fine dress ones that are much more effective for those kind of fabrics. Fork pins, these are like basically kind of like double pin them, and they're really good for if you're using like slippery kind of like tight fabrics, like what I've done with like lycra, because it gives it at least a bit more stability as well, and also you're not really, I guess, using as many pins either. Safety pins, good old safety pins, like well, I'm sure most of us have like used this as well, like, you know, say like if the garment's a little bit too big, or you want to pin something like to hold it in place. They're also very good for like feeding like cords through it as well. And the last ones is like curve safety pins, which I like literally discovered recently. I find that these are quite handy for all of your basting types of fabrics, like together. Say if you're aligning with like something that's straight, because if you basically pin it and try to align it with like safety pins, chances are it will come up, but these ones will try to avoid it. But to be honest, the reason why I actually use these like safety pins is because it's for my e-bags, so which works extremely better than like the safety pins, just because it's got a bit of like curve onto it. So I thought that might be something that would be quite useful if you're a trash person like me who does all that. And finally, needles. So always very handy to have like a pack of like hand needles on you. And like generally, the general rule is that like the shorter and higher the number, this is more suited for like the more delicate fabrics, and the longer and the lower the number is more suited for heavy fabrics, because there are times which obviously you have to hand sew something where you usually can't put it through the sewing machine. So great for buttons, it's great for clothes, that's like useful. And the other sort of needle that I would also like say is really useful, say when you're sewing like wefts as well, is that it's a curved needle, and for any kind of edges which like you know that it's going to be really tricky to straighten needle. So for example, this little bag that I made, as you can see, this clasp completely solid, and if you imagine trying to get a straight needle right through these little holes, it would be really tricky. So a curved needle I would like to recommend a lot more if you have something like this. Okay, so we've got the second section, so what interfacing, different types of weights of interfacing. Lightweight iron-on, this is generally used for more like sheer kind of like fabrics, like medium weights like iron-on. This is like, as the name suggests, which I tend to always like use a lot more of, is like cottons and linens. Stiff like heavy iron-on, this is generally for if you're making like something that's like wool, or something to do with like wool, denim, that kind of like weight of like fabric. And there's also sewing like type of fabric, so if you were working with something like velvet where you can't put heat onto it, I would recommend that you use like a sewing like interfacing instead. And there is actually, and also fusible welding is another thing like that adds like volume to places. Say if you're making like bows, for example, you can actually like use this kind of interfacing to iron onto it, and then it'll be a lot more puffier. And I've seen it like people also use it for like things where they need generally more volume, such as like say fake muscle suits or something, because I look a good muscle. Okay, and just general notes. So interfacing comes in like black and white. Sometimes grey as well. It's also generally used to stiffen, like strengthen like areas, and it's used to stabilise edges. So say if you had something like like cotton jersey. If you ever worked with something like that, it will roll like and it's like in order to kind of sort of roll it, I would recommend you stabilise it with an interfacing. And I do actually have samples of all these different kind of thicknesses that you can actually feel. Next one is buckram. So buckram is a different type of interfacing, but it's like a bit different than the other interfacing because it's really like stiff. There's like kind of like fine weaving to it. Generally, they come in as iron-on and sewing. They are generally used more for like book covers and more for kind of like making hats as well. Like I've done with this one. So basically, that little cap and also the main body of it, I actually use buckram for it because it gave it that kind of stability. But obviously, I sewed my fabric outer layer to kind of like go around it. And it's like, it's sewn really well through the machine, it's like brilliant for this stuff. And the other thing that's brilliant is well, it applies stiffness to like costume. So if you need something that particularly needs like structure, like it's great for that. For example, I recently made like a holster which is for like a prop. And what I did was that I wanted my thickness, but I wanted it to be light as well. I basically attached buckram onto a piece of EVA foam and then gave it that stability that I needed. So it's super handy if you don't want something that's too thick and you need something that's strength in it. Also got a little sample of buckram as well in case you guys wanted to feel that. Okay, next one, fabric spray glue. So the idea is of this is that this is supposed to hold temporary fabrics like together before like you sew it. So for example, I had this like blue fabric and I had this really sparkly netting on it, and because I knew it was going to move all over the place, I actually sprayed the base fabric first, attached the netting lightly on top of it, and then it created this really like cool effect, and like it also like held it together as I was like sewing it. But obviously I would like still test it. Generally though, from my experience, whenever I used it, whenever I knew how to use the iron on it, these are the glue just go away. So it's like really, really handy for that reason. And the other reason I would use it is like it's good for securing tricky fabrics and pieces together. So for example, I made a book and there's all these different little pieces, and at first I tried to kind of like not actually have anything like glue on top of it to sew it, and it was a nightmare. So I sprayed the back of each of these pieces, and like that we've sewn to you can imagine it made it so much easier just because it made it stay in place. So I would say it's like this is really good stuff for examples like this. And it can also be used for sewing interfacing. So if it's going to shift, then like if you have to use something like again velvet for example. I would like say you kind of like spray something in the back of that, the interfacing, and then you attach it lightly onto the velvet. Just a light spray, like because I've had it before where I've actually accidentally done it and it's become like a really wet, gloopy mess. So just a word of warning. Lips. So lips are like these like beauties. So generally they are really, really good for if you're managing fabrics that have like any kind of like that's like perfect something big or like something which will leave holes in it and you don't want to use like basically all your pins for. And also they're very good for if you're making awkward like things like boot covers, because I found that when I was trying to use pins on like something like that's that awkward shape, it didn't work. But when I used pins, it managed to like feed through a lot more better. It's good for also securing like glue trims as well, which I've done here. So after, if it's like a glue that needs like, say like 30 minutes to dry or something, it's always a good idea to use these to hold down the trim so that like you can make sure that that trim will stay there after it dries. Then the last thing is, another useful tip for it is like you can use hot magnets. So, say you've ever in that position of like making horns or something, like or something that you might attach to your head. If you use a hairband, for example, these are really good for securing the magnets. And the beauty of it is because the clips already have a bit of metal in it, it attaches to the magnet, so it's just going to make it stay there after you just basically move it down. So, just various examples of like how you can use those. Right, sewing machine feet. So these are just general ones that I tend to use like more commonly that I would say would be the recommendation. So every single sewing machine should come with a standard butt press foot. If it doesn't, I'd say get your money back. So that's just for general like sewing. It's more like say like anything like cuffs and something too complicated. Zipper foot should also come with like your sewing machine as well, and this would be to use like for like dress like biceps, open or like closed fitted. This is invisible zipper fit. This is the zip that I prefer using because I actually like it when the zip is not actually shown like on top of my garment. So I get a very specific zipper, like to specific fit to use like for that zipper. So I would say that's something that would be worth the investment. Walking foot. Walking Fit is quite an expensive one to get, but because of the fact that I chose to buy this Walking Fit, it actually makes it so much easier when I'm actually sewing things together, because I'm sure a lot of us probably understand what it's like when the material goes through a sewing machine and it's not lining up right, and you literally just want to just throw it across the room. So something like this would be really, really worth your while, honestly. It's just made so much difference because I tend to use a lot of very tricky fabrics just because I just like to make myself suffer. But otherwise, the cheap alternative is a Teflon Fit. Teflon Fit is it's very good for vinyls. So if you have to sew anything that had a very sticky kind of feel to it through your sewing machine, it will attach to the fit. So using a Teflon Fit, it actually kind of counteracts that. But if it still doesn't work, just basically put a piece of clear tape underneath it, and then it should glide through quite smoothly. Just as another small tip for you. Sewing machine needles. So universal needles. So I tend to basically get all different kind of sizes because I'm a bit of a hoarder, to be honest, and also I just work with several different types of materials. So generally these are ones that you would start with. Fine needles. So these ones I would recommend if you're working with silk type kind of fabrics or very sheer fabrics, because it's a lot more skinnier and a lot more sharper the needle heads. Stretch needles, self-explanatory, works with lycra, and spandex. It's more built for that reason. Leather needles, another one, self-explanatory, leather needles, so it's best used for sticky type fabrics. And ballpoint jersey needles. This one I tend to use quite a lot because I sew quite a lot of knit kind of type fabrics. So it's great for pants, it's great for scuba. It's great for jersey. Sometimes I find that I alternate between both stretch and the ballpoint pens. Sometimes the stretch needle doesn't work, but then the ballpoint needles does. So I would say test between both of those if you are going to go through a project that is using that kind of tricky fabric. Right, fabric turners. So if you've ever been in that position where you've sewn a long tube and then you have to turn it out, you will basically know how much you will absolutely hurt your hands if you do it manually. So there's these fabric turners that actually work where the idea is it's like this tube where it's a plastic tube, solid like that. You basically insert it into your tube, and then from the other side you basically poke with a stick through, and it basically should poke through your fabric. And it's actually it's very cheap as well, and it basically comes in different sizes, so I'd say that this is actually great to use. The other one, which is a bit more expensive, which I've discovered quite recently, is this easy point turner, which is this little device here. Maybe I can do a very, very quick demonstration of this one. So the idea is you've got a pointy side and you've got a flat side. You basically have to insert one end of it. Basically you've got this manky piece of material that's you just sewn, let's turn it out. Basically then you have to pinch the corner, you have to wriggle it. It's this bit is normally the most trickiest. You can be there for quite a while. But then eventually it will start to feed through. Then you take it out. This bit should be on the inside, so this bit should be quite set out. So I would say that is a really good one. And it's you can see how pretty easy that was, basically turn right side out. But it is expensive. I would only recommend it if you're using if you know you have to basically turn a lot of types of fabric out like that. Word of caution though, it does require a bit of practice, so no matter which option you use, it will require a lot of patience. The hardest bit is literally trying to just get it started and feed it through in the first place. The results vary to materials. So I've actually tested both of these tools, and I tested various kinds of materials, and not all of them might work. So basically, for example, if it's something very delicate, say netting or something, it basically will not work with that, and also it's really thick fabric. So if you're using something like velvet, that is bloody hard to basically turn like right side out. So I would say that probably avoid it if you can, not to use these kind of like types of fabrics. Also, use a narrow lead stitch for the stretch. This is the other thing is if you're using like non-stretch like fabric, I would say use the tiny stitch that you can, because like of the fact you are going to be using a lot of pressure and force to try and like basically pull it the other way. The thread will end up snapping, so this is why I would mention make sure you use a narrow length for the non-stretch like fabrics. If you for whatever reason you are using something that has a bit of stretch in it, I would say use the I think it's like the triple slice stitch or something, which you use for like stretch garments, because I tested it before when I used say jersey fabric against against both of these, and it just kept snapping. Even when I tried to use a zigzag stitch, that kept snapping. So I'd recommend use that type of very tough stitch for it. Yeah.
My mum taught me a trick about turning it out. As long as it's not too thin,
yeah.
And if it is, you can sew an extra dot at the corner that you want to basically pull through.
Yeah.
Have that attached to a needle
yes.
through there, and then start sewing around, so that once you're ready to do it in, you can then carefully push through. She also said that if it's a bit thicker, you can use a knitting needle, just the other way around, and basically just carefully try and feed it through that little bit, and then just turn it inside out along the knitting needle.
So that's a very, very good tip. I did not know that.
A boba straw and a chopstick.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I know all you weaves have.
Yeah, that's very, very cheap.
I do not.
What if it works? It will get you there. The next thing is tailor's hand seam roll, which I have found myself that this is so useful. So the idea is they're used to iron on areas where there's darts or it's on feathers. I've even used it if I was ironing on DK pieces as well, because at least it doesn't make it as harsh for when I use an iron on a flat surface. The seam roll, this is really good for say trouser legs. It's really good for arms, for sleeves as well. Just because it's a lot more skinnier, as you can see. So general notes is the idea it prevents indents, creases, and also crushing. And I would say I've used these so much, and it's honestly made the finishing of my crossbows a lot better because of the fact I actually use these. And these are very, very useful for if you do something like princess seams, which is what I've done here. Because you see that because of the fact I actually use this to iron on this seam, it comes out a lot more cleaner. So bias tape, fourth section now. So bias tape, I imagine a lot of us have touched in the past, and I can show various examples. So I've got a jersey one, which I've used on this t-shirt. I've got a lyrics one if you want something a bit more fabulous and sparkly, like I always do. Satin, if you just want something that's shiny, but not exactly in your face. And brocard. Brocard doesn't exist because you can actually make your own with this little handy device here, which is also if you want a specific kind of fabric, I would also recommend that. I also have little samples of different types of bias tips in case you guys want to feel the differences between this. Sorry.
Interesting.
Make sure obviously to keep it at 45-degree angle as well for bias tapes. Bundle web tape. So this is basically, if you've ever used bundle web or pleating before, this is the tape version of it, and it's really useful if you just want sewing on the threads on the outside of your garment, and you just wanted to iron everything instead. This is a recommendation. Otherwise, bonded web tape does also exist. Again, it's the same as the plique. We have the backing on top of it, and this one I find is actually a lot more cleaner, the method, than using this one, because it will at least help you to know that the glue is not going to go anywhere outside of the area you want it. So quite difficult to see. way it works is pretty much the same as just like a standard template. So basically iron that, and then after you let it cool, peel off the backing, and then you put like say the ribbon on top of it, and then you iron that on, and it's got this like really like neat finish on it. And I've got a sample in case you guys want to build that as well. Iron on like hem tape. So this is mainly like to kind of prevent those hems like from stretching. So for example, this first option, this one is really good if you're doing inserting zips on it. So because I've done it before for where I've used it for like stretchy leotards or something, and I wanted stability for like where I'm putting zips. It is really good for these kind of like edges, just to make sure that not only do you have something that's a bit more thicker, but it won't kind of like roll, like the edges won't much roll. The other type that you can like use is like for like curved edges, and you can see that there is a diagonal pattern here and there's a thread running through it. The idea is it's supposed to like curve, so it makes like you know, neck edges like a lot more easy to kind of like do. Also got a sample if you guys want to like to see up close of that as well. Another one like I've got is double-sided like hem tape. So this is something which I really wish that I discovered a lot more sooner. So it's pretty much like, I guess, a double-sided tape that it's safe for like for fabrics. And this is really good for these kind of various different examples. So I basically designed something. I had this tape which was made of taffeta and was made with like velvet. Didn't have to make myself suffer, but I did anyways. So what I did was that I used this tape against the edges so that it wouldn't like keep sliding. Another example I've used it on is that this is made of obviously pleather, stretch pleather, and it will burn the iron. So and also because it's such a small little piece like that I made for like a glove, I secured the double tape onto this edge, and then when I put it through the sewing machine, it just made it so much more easier because it wasn't moving all over the place. Because if you've ever sewn like the edges of gloves before, you'll know that it's quite a tricky piece to try and like go through the machine and try and sew it neatly. So it's very for that reason. And also another great thing that double-sided hem tape is like helpful for is if you're putting zips like into like garments. So before where I've had to either put needles into it, like or I've had to like you know, hand baste it as well. This is another very quick option when like in order for you to kind of like make sure the zip is staying in the place right after you put it through like or you put it through the sewing machine, sorry. And fishbone tape. So fishbone tape is basically this. So the way it works is that it's this kind of like tape that has this kind of like teeth on the edges, and like you basically, what you have to do, quite easy, just pull off what you like don't need, and like that's the equivalent to what your hem what you want your hem finishing to be. And you basically just run it through like a sewing machine. So you first sew it on the outside of the garment, making sure that you don't actually catch like this little like edge here, and then you basically fold it to the inside of the garment, sew it down again. You pull it like pull the tape away, and it's basically this really clean edge. So this is so handy. Or if you were to use like delicate chiffons or something, or I've seen a lot of people use it for, say, like, you know, Dan-made costumes where there's a lot of fabric, there's a lot of kind of like floatiness as well. This has made like those kind of cosplays a lot more easier because of the fact they have used this. So is this So elastic, I'm sure a lot of us have like used elastic in our time of like crafting. So elastic, generally these are various examples of ways that I've actually used elastic. Really good for waistbands. It's like which I've used on a petticoat up here. It's also really good for when you're making leotards. Like so, I had one which was like one shoulder like kind of like leotard. I had to use elastic for it. It basically creates this really nice kind of like edge onto it. And another way you can use elastic is that you can use it to create ruffles as well. So that's also another quite easy way instead of literally gathering fabric. We can actually use elastic to do that basically for you. Comes in basically lots of bits. These sometimes it doesn't come in very colour. Generally you get either black or white. If you ever had in that position where you've had long gloves, you have long thigh highs or something, and it keeps slipping down, silicone grip elastic does exist, and the idea is that obviously it grips into your skin so that it won't fall down, and it's super handy. For when you got say leg kind of garments like this, and because of that I used it in these kind of pieces, it became so handy. And I've got a little sample as well that I can actually show you guys if you're curious.
Unfortunately, that silicone ripper elastic only works on skin. I've got I've had customers buy my name specifically because it kept rolling down.
So that's what you guys recommend. Okay. Fifth section, I think I've got about 5 minutes, I can actually talk through this one as well. Zips. So basically, our section, generally closed-end zip is good for generally anything, trousers, dresses, bags, purses. I used it for making front side zip for trousers. It's the one that I normally use most of us will literally use. Invisible zip, like I mentioned before, it's something that I really like using because it looks a lot more cleaner, so it's not exposure on the outside. And open-ended zip is something that you would only use specifically if you're making something like a hoodie, for example, or like a cardigan. So these are just general notes for different colours. There's either plastic or metal, and and basically you can also make your own, but these are more restricted to the close-end zip. I've never seen ones where you can make it for invisible zips, but that is an option if you want to get specific lengths together. You know you're only doing say mass producing something that has a lot of zips. Yeah, it is really fun stuff. That's so cool. And obviously use the correct zip fit when you are sewing. Snap fasteners. This is something I absolutely love using because of the fact that so for example, I wanted to not to ruin the dress, and I wanted to attach a cape onto a dress. I use snap fasteners so that it just hangs off of it. And also, if you ever cosplay from Hoyoverse, you will understand my frustration of what it's like to have a gazillion layers that doesn't make sense, and everything just seems to be attached with buttons and loops, and I hated it. So what I ended up doing was that I actually replaced a lot of that, so that everything just clips together. Because the best thing about Hoyoverse cosplays is after you got fed up wearing it, you can literally be like, oh, freeze! And that is why I love using these clips. It's exactly the same reason for actually in any cosplay really, after you get fed on, you're literally like, oh, instead of just filling about the buttons. So that's another great option. Velcro. So Velcro, it comes in basically the solar Velcro, which you generally would use. So I once used it on a shirt where I wanted it to look fairly quite straight, and also I wanted to get out of it quite easily. I decided to use it for that kind of reason. Another kind of Velcro that exists is one that has adhesive in the bottom, and I would say do not use this on fabrics and garments, because that adhesive is not really meant for that kind of reason, but it is really good for securing just small little tops like that. Generally, they're really used for DIY anyways. I just thought I'd mention that this does exist. And that is actually my last slide. So